Hey guys, what's going on? The Olympics has certainly been crazy this year already. So many different things that have been going on. It's been really cool to watch. But something that's been a bit of a contentious issue is the question around these spikes. The Super Nikes or Puma with the same technology and New Balance with some similar technology as well. Luckily, I was got in early and managed to get myself a pair of Maxflies, and I trained in them yesterday, and they definitely live up to some of the hype, and I can sort of see how athletes are running better. So what I thought I'd do is for you guys, I've had a lot of messages, and what I thought I'd do is actually just have a bit of a chat about the three spikes and compare these to the two pairs of spikes that most of you guys are probably pretty familiar with, and that's the Nike Superfly Elites and the Adidas Adizero Prime SP. You look around the circuit, most athletes have probably much either worn this pair or this pair at some point in their life. There's obviously, of course, the Superfly Elite 2s, which are a bit more of that weaved upper, but for all intensive purposes, they've got the same plate pretty much as these spikes. It's just the upper's a little bit different, but not as many people like the Superfly Elite 2s as what they do this, so that's why I've chosen to do this spike. So yeah, first things first, I trained in these yesterday. They feel pretty damn crazy. Now, who's to say, like, you know, if it's all the hype that comes with it as well, but, you know, who knows? So what I thought I'd do is I'd just get into some of the nuts and bolts and give you a bit of a comparison. And the first thing they talk about that comes up with these spikes is the plate that they have. And I can confirm that this is incredibly stiff, and the foam that comes with it as well. And I think that's some of the thought behind what Nike had, is that if you had a super stiff plate, another pair of spikes that Asics came out with, a really stiff carbon fiber, you need to be strong enough to do that justice. But what Nike have done is they've used an incredibly stiff plate here, but used some foam and added in a Zoom Air unit and some Zoom X foam, as they call it, which disperses some of this carbon fiber energy. I think, not exactly 100% sure of the science and what they're thinking behind it is, but it's supposedly like provides a bit more cushioning so you don't absolutely rupture your Achilles every time you run. And I'll show you the first thing first. So here's the Superfly Elite 2 with their spike. Now, these have been worn a little bit, but on the whole, there's a fair bit of flex, but in the midfoot where you want most of that, you can't flex it much at all. But heel and toe, you can still get a bit of flexion. Similar to the Adidas here, there's a bit in the heel, there's a little bit less in the toe than the Superflies, but in the midfoot, you can't bend this spike really at all. Now, into the Maxflies. These spikes, they don't bend. This carbon fiber plate is stiff as hell. The heel doesn't move, the toe doesn't move, and neither does the midfoot. Like, I can't get any flexion out of this. And that's the first thing I noticed yesterday. And you don't necessarily notice it when you're driving out, because all these spikes have similar toe-off heights. So when you're driving, you feel like you can hit the same angle. But when you actually strike that ground, the power and bounce that you get back at max velocity when you're applying vertical force, it feels like you get so much more and you can pick up heaps quicker. So that's the first noticeable difference I've got between these Zoom Maxflies. And you can sort of see how people can finish races stronger, and that's where like people like Sprint Sensei, he noticed and said himself when he raced, he feels like it probably takes 0.1 or 0.2 of a second off that time. And that's where I can see the difference in terms of probably getting a slightly higher max velocity than usual, and then in turn, being able to maintain that max velocity for a little bit longer, and the degradation of top speed is a little bit less, and that curve is a bit smoother, because if the plate is stiffer, you get more energy return, and if there's cushioning to absorb that, you're going to get that absorbed a little bit more. And some of the stats I've seen, it's so hard to know, like obviously there isn't a lot of research yet, but a couple of blogs and stuff like that have said you can get up to an extra 15% energy return. Now per stride, if you exhibit 100 kilos of force, for example, these spikes you're going to get 85 kilos back, whereas these spikes you're going to get 70 kilos back. And step over step over step, you can see how those maths slowly adds up in your favor, where you can carry that speed for a bit longer. The next thing that's different between these spikes, obviously between the Superfly Elites and these ones, if you haven't used them before, is the lacing. It's like a notch lacing, which helps it keeps it a bit tight. It feels like you can lock your foot down a little bit more, and they're less likely to come undone. The Adidas are a bit of a different beast in and of themselves. The upper and the laces are a little bit different. I don't know if you can see, but the upper, it's actually one piece. There's no tongue and shoe like the Nikes have. So it feels like you're putting it into a sock, and then you just tie down the laces at the top, and then that's what secures your foot in. Whereas the Nikes, you have a bit more of an option to actually pull the tongue around, move it around a little bit, and then really lock your foot down with the laces. Apart from that, there isn't a whole heap difference between the two Nikes themselves. It's the same sort of inner, upper sole. And the big thing you notice is just how soft the cushioning is for your heel when you're landing, when you're walking around. So you get this quick, nice hit down, and then the heel is just a quick little tap, even if it touches the ground at all. And you can just really feel the cushioning there. So really interesting spikes. This is definitely changing the game in terms of shoes, and I'd love to get my hands on a pair of the Pumas, because they look just as interesting and have a very similar technology to the Nikes, I believe. Obviously, you know, they're different brands, so they're working on different things. But in terms of the future of spikes, I think when there's just a very minimal heel and a stiff plate, shoe brands are going to start adding in something where there's more stiffness at either end, and there's probably a bit of cushioning to give you extra energy return, as opposed to just having the athlete do all of the work just with the one spike plate. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed it. I don't think there's much else to really talk about, except probably I'll give you a look at the shoe. The two zoom units, air zoom units here, is that they're actually split. It's not one zoom unit across the bottom of the shoe, and I think that is because there's less dispersion of forces. So if an athlete hits the ground here, which is what most sprinters do, on the inside edge of their foot, you don't want all that force dispersing to the outside of the shoe. So they've centered it, so they've got the outside of the foot maybe when you're landing on the bend, and then the inside of the foot when you're running on a straight, so that less of that force gets dispersed and gets returned back to you. But the shoe itself is very, very cool. I like it a lot. It's very fun to run in. I'll probably buy another 4 or 5 pairs before this year is out, but who knows, we'll see what we do. And compared to the Adidas Prime SPs and the Nike Superfly Elites, there isn't a whole heap difference in how your foot locks down, but when you're at max velocity and when you're up nice and tall, you feel this energy come back towards you. But yeah, driving out and accelerating, there isn't too much. So here's my take on the Nike Maxflies. Hopefully we see a few more world records and these become a bit more available to the public. Thanks guys.